Okay, we are in closed session.
So, yeah,
Is Dawn calling in or no?
she will be joining us for open session at 7:30. So basically, just wanted to kind of get a chance to level set, ask a couple questions. If anybody had any last minute questions, we had so much conversation, I know, back and forth last week. There was a lot of moving parts. And so I think we did our best to keep everybody in the loop and communicated with. Eris did a great job of supplying us with our 3 options, which is kind of what got us here tonight. So we brought Eris in just to see if anybody had any other questions. And if anybody had any questions about what we'll be discussing tonight, too, in open session.
Eris, I'm just happy to see a face. I'm Allison.
All
by
these
the way.
phone calls, yes, indeed. Of course, Judy, yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
That's right, he's not been in
It's funny
person.
because
so
I
this
feel
is
like I
Eris.
have seen you in person,
Yeah.
but I think it's just because we've been on Zoom
I
a
think
Zoom
that's
calls.
time.
true,
So
yes,
yeah,
indeed,
yeah. So
Can I've got 6 in my head.
I feel like Julie, you had some questions and stuff, but
for feeling a little clunky on it. The agenda description may imply or may not imply that there's going to be a motion to reject the bid, and I was a little. I'm a risk-averse person by nature, and had a few questions around anyone's perceptions or input on could this put the existing 2 bids at risk of never showing up again for, like, are we killing the deal, which may resurface or may not, and also I was curious about potential timelines, and this may be getting ahead of where, I don't mean to be front-running an assumption,
Sure.
but part of my thought process is getting concerned about how many more meetings or how few meetings are coming up in the next few months, which feels like, in my head, a good time to act and be definitively act in whichever direction. So I guess I'm asking those 2 questions initially.
Yeah, so I mean, the issue, are we killing the 2 bids? So Prologis is completely non-conforming, so that was never going to come together to begin with. Bridge, I mean, their earnest money would have been significantly late, and they did want to renegotiate some of the terms and conditions. So I think the question would be, are we creating additional material variances from the terms and conditions that somebody could challenge? So even by saying, sort of, these are both non-conforming bids, that doesn't prevent Bridge or UPS or the folks from Hiffman that Brian Stashak talked to from coming back and working something out with a minimum $55 million. So we don't want to twiddle our thumbs. I think it's imperative that literally tomorrow some of that outreach begins. I talked to John Pazarecki today and just wanted to touch base with him. I don't know if you guys, I had sent it to Brian and Carrie, but Cranes reported today that Bridge is allegedly under contract to buy the Baxter campus up in Deerfield. So that's like a 100-acre campus. And it was interesting, John Pazarecki said everybody's under a confidentiality agreement, and I didn't know where that reporter got the information. He said 90% of it is wrong, but they are moving forward with that. And so they're going to have to do something like Willow Springs would have to do. It's currently a corporate campus built in the early 70s, and they're going to convert it to warehouse. I mean, that's what Bridge does. So I asked John, I said, you have too many plates in the air. And he said, no, we can do it. We can do McCook, Electromotive. We can do Deerfield. We can do Willow Springs, and we have other things going on. So that bandwidth is not an issue with them. He did use for the first time today the expression lukewarm in terms of their level of interest. So that was a little discouraging because it's previously all been sort of enthusiastically positive as opposed to lukewarm. But I asked him, when can we expect your revised terms and conditions, your dot point list? He said early next week.
Okay.
So we'll just have to wait and see if we get anything. I mean, their whole thing now is kind of let things cool off and let's lay low, reject the bid tonight. I don't want it to seem like Bridge is immediately engaged in a contract negotiation with LT, his words.
Got it.
And so if knock on wood, they come back next week with something. But I think in the meantime, Brian talks to the Hiffman brokers about their 2 qualified candidates. We talked to Prologis. Maybe they're willing to move the needle on their offer. Talk to UPS and some of the other folks, Seafried that you talked to. And let's see, now that sort of the time pressure's off, maybe other parties will come forward. The key thing, it's got to be $55 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quick follow-up on, and just a point of clarification. are they, because they've bid, I mean, I understand in the diligence process, you could have, let's just say there's an environmental issue that comes up that nobody knew about, and there's reasons they could back out. Can they back out just because they have cold feet at this point?
In the first 120 days, per our terms and conditions, what we're calling the feasibility period, it's basically a free look. They could back out
Okay.
during that time
So there's no
period.
advantage, there's no, I think I had maybe a slight perceived advantage of if the board were to move forward today, we've kind of locked
Locked them
Bridge in for, but I think a lot of the control remains in their hands.
It
and
does. I
doesn't
mean,
have
you've
to
locked
be-
them in the sense of they have signed a contract, they're gonna be getting information from us, they're gonna be generating their own reports, but within 120 days, they can walk away for any reason and get 100% of their earnest money back.
Okay, that's a helpful reminder.
Yeah.
So that's meaningful to my thought process.
Mhm.
Thank you for
Sure.
entertaining my
Yep.
No,
initial
appreciate that.
questions.
And that was a concern I thought too, like, are we, killing the deal? Like, that would be our biggest risk, right? I mean, there's lots of risks, but I think like if our goal is to sell the property, then our biggest risk is that tonight we could potentially not see another offer. I mean, at least at that amount. We could, but we may not. There is that chance.
There is that chance. I mean, the Village of Willow Springs has been pretty loud.
Yep.
And all these other bidders are hearing that same noise
Yep.
as well. And they may be, hey, we got these other opportunities. Why walk into something
Right.
complicated when there's simpler opportunities out there? And that's human nature, and you can't blame them for that. But that doesn't mean that a qualified contract purchaser can't go through the proper steps, approach the village, apply, get a plan commission hearing, get a vote, and move forward with
Right.
it and see what happens. They'd probably sink a couple $100,000 into that process, but, I think for some of these big organizations, that's not prohibitive, let's put it that way.
Go
So
ahead, Jen.
let's say nothing happens, then do we come back together and start over at a lower amount, or is that something that we talk about down the road? How does that?
Yeah, normally.
And what's the time frame to give?
Yeah,
for people
good
to come
question.
back?
So there's nothing in the statute specifically says that you have to talk to the world and try to negotiate something. The board could approve, you could reject on one agenda item and approve a new set of terms and conditions with, say, a lower minimum price tonight. You could do that at your February meeting, too. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is if Brian and are reaching out and everybody's like, no, thank you, maybe next month, that's what the board does. And you hit the reset button and say, listen, our minimum bid is now $45 million. And you get the word out to as many possible bidders as you can and see what happens, But it is possible that nothing will come of this, that several months will pass. I gave Carrie and Brian Waterman an example. Barrington School District, who I've worked with for a long time, they bought a new admin center just south of Barrington High School, which is on the north side of Lake Cook Road. They call it Main Street. South side, they bought this R&D facility, turned it into an admin center. And they have their old admin center, which is kind of a decrepit, low-ceilinged, older building. They've done 3 times new terms and conditions minimum bid and are finally starting to get some expressions of interest. So, and they started pre-COVID. Now, maybe they were just way too high with their appraisal that they had, but, and this is kind of an oddball building they're trying to sell. You guys have this pristine, regularly shaped parcel. So it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen, but if you want to move the ball next month, put the terms and conditions back on. If nothing's happening with private conversations, you could do it that way.
Ooh,
And then
there
is
is
it-
some concerns, I think.
Well,
for-
that's
For
other-
me,
yeah.
and also just thinking Bridge could come back next week and say, we're looking at like 49. And could we?
Sure.
Is there, what are the pros of saying yes, of
Well-
moving forward tonight? Does it?
They wouldn't be able to submit it at 40. I mean, they could submit it at 49, but we haven't changed at this
Right.
point, we have not
If
changed
they
But,
said
our
but
we-
they
sale
now have the
price.
benefit of information that says nobody else showed up, Prologis showed up for 46, and we bid 55. Why don't we save $5 million in this high interest rate environment? And we're gonna say, guys, they have an advantage now because the sealed bids have been opened and
Sure.
they know how. I haven't talked to them. I'm just sort of putting myself in their
That's valid.
business shoes, like,
That's
why
valid.
would they be incented, especially after the hassle from Willow Springs,
Well-
to maintain a $55 million bid or show up at all?
Right, but why would we're not desperate here. Like, why would we sell it for that much lower than what it's worth? Everyone knows it's worth $60 million. So why would we go in at 45? 55 was the lowest that we said that we would go. And so because the bids were opened and they bid 55 million and we're rejecting that now because the terms weren't met, there's no reason to say that we're desperate that we should be looking to go less than that. I think we look stupid if we did.
I just worry that we lose the
I
only
wasn't
market.
suggesting that, I just
Yeah.
wanted to know the scenario.
I'm just,
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm like passionate about it because I think there's some other things that play here too that could be happening that we'll talk about. But, you know, that for us, as the public knows, it was 60 million that it's valued at.
I don't know that
And
the
then-
60's out there. I was
Well,
correct.
it is.
I-
Isn't it?
that's-
Yeah, no, well,
That's our
it
internal
really
memo.
depends on how you calculate the
FOIA,
appraisal
right.
versus the letter of intent. And keep in mind that
It's
that
not
letter of
printed on the
intent was
website.
not,
I thought it was.
it was also not accurate based upon the size of the parcel. So they based
Slightly
that.
lower.
So I think it's more like 58.7. Like, I think the 55 million offer per acre is 58.7 would have been the.
Yeah.
Actual
I'm with
amount
you,
from
Michael,
last
like,
year.
if we
Exactly.
end
But
up
that's
at
If you did- if you
45,
did
we've disappointed all the people who were excited about 55, who are maybe less vocal in a public setting typically because they just would like to see this move on. And then you've still pissed off the Willow Springs adjacency residents because you're moving forward. So that feels like a worse outcome, lower price and still moving forward. Like, we've now, I don't know, and the timing, 3 board seats are out for reelection real soon. And we've talked about that for some amount of time.
I think that the thing tonight is, I feel really comfortable rejecting it because of the risk involved of not rejecting it, and I feel like
And can you articulate more about that? Because I'm still foggy on
and
the risk.
I'm not the person to talk about the risk, but
Okay, yeah.
the risk of basically like, I don't want to put ourselves at risk of, right now, we aren't taking the bid that we asked for. We're not, the terms and conditions are different, and they didn't give the earnest money. So, Joe Schmo could come in and say, well, we would have bid on it if we knew you'd take something without the earnest money or different T's and C's. So,
Is that where the litigation risk is coming from?
Yeah.
Another
Yeah, you want to
bidder?
talk about that, Eris? Just
Yeah.
that
Because
concept.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
I think
but
Joe Schmo is real fancy of me, by the way.
Yes.
Real
Yeah, I didn't know if
fancy.
Joe Schmo's 45-year-old resident
Who has
works
55
in
million.
Chicago, or it's a
Another
potential
company.
bidder. I was
Yeah, talk
confused.
about the risk with those
Yeah,
options
so-
1 and 2.
And I don't want to overstate it, because what we said in the terms and conditions is the earnest money needed to come in at the bid opening, $500,000. So neither Prologis nor Bridge did that. And so when we sat down with Bridge in Brian's office, we said, hey, you should have brought this in now. We'll give you a week or 8 days. So they were going to bring it in last Thursday before the agenda was published. The potential exposure
And they didn't.
is.
They do.
They never
Okay,
did,
sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
So the potential exposure there is some other bidder could come forward, either Prologis, unlikely because they already bid, or another party saying, hey, I would have bid had I known I really didn't need to bring the earnest money in, and all I need to do is show up with an envelope saying 56 million or whatever my number is. So,
And then what happens, though?
well, see, first of all, no one even knows that,
Yeah.
honestly. So the likelihood of someone figuring out that earnest money checks were never deposited is pretty low. But if it were to come out, worst case scenario, someone goes in front of a judge and asks for an injunction to stop the transaction from going forward, saying, Your Honor, hey, I'm Duke Realty or Centerpoint or somebody else. I would have bid had I known I didn't need to come up with $500,000 11 days after the new year or something like that. And that's, is it a material variance? I had sent you the case law. There's no cases on earnest money deposit. There's a fair amount of case law on the bid bonds. And if you're, like the Champaign case, the contract said 10% bid bond, this guy came in at 5%, they accepted him, but the other one went to court and said, hey, I could have offered a lower bid or been more competitive had I been allowed to come in with 5% bid bond. I think the same argument applies here. Would somebody have ever come forward? We'll never know, and I think the odds are low, frankly. And could we say to a judge, Your Honor, you know what, this is not a material variance, it's within the discretion. We hung our hat on the language of the terms and conditions, allowing the board to waive irregularities. I think we have a good argument.
Yeah. But, and even so, what's the remedy? Okay, let's say we go forward with Bridge at 55 and someone comes in and says, I would have done 56. We're in court. Like, what could be the possible, and maybe it's infinite and hard to say, but like, what's the remedy?
I think the judge would say, do it again. There's no monetary damages. They would
Yeah.
just cancel the contract or the sort of open-ended arrangement with Bridge and go back to the board and say, hey, if you want to
But
sell
then at
this.
least you likely have a bid, I'm sorry to interrupt, then you at least likely have this $56 million guy who's gonna bid.
Good point, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
know, you can't predict human
The other
behavior.
thing
I'm
what
just most
Bridge
worried about
wanted to do, though, is they also wanted to modify the terms and conditions. So then you're talking about more than one variance from the terms. So you're departing from the timeliness of the earnest money, and they wanted to make either less or none of the earnest money non-refundable at the end of the feasibility period. So the more variances you add that were not published and available to all the other bidders, I think the more questionable it comes. Again, you've got to have somebody willing to go into court and spend money and file a lawsuit. And whether that entity exists, who knows?
And to that point, Eris, so if, you know, in the foreseeable future, beyond tonight, if we vote to reject the bids, and Bridge decides to come forward again, they very well could present us with an alternative set of terms and conditions as they've been talking about. And then that is something that then the board would have to look at again, or like how do we, that would be a discussion point, I assume.
Yeah, so if they, let's say a week from today, John Pezarecki does what he said they plan on doing, and he comes back and said, Eris, we'll pay $55 million, but instead of $100,000 becoming non-refundable at the end of the feasibility period, we want it to be $25,000. And at the end of the approval period, which is like municipal approvals, instead of another $100,000 becoming non-refundable, it's just another $25,000. So they're like taking risk out of the transaction that they're not going to get this earnest money back if either something about the property isn't right or if the municipality ultimately blows it up for them. So those would be the kind of things they would want to do, I think.
And
He
we're
mentioned
allowed to do it if we reject
Okay.
the bid and go with a different.
as a negotiation, yes,
Done.
as long as the
Okay.
price is still 55. The one thing you can't do on negotiation is agree on a lower price.
Do they know that?
I don't know if they know it or not. I mean, I did tell John, here's the section of the school code that we're relying on. This
Hello.
lays it out. And
Hi, Don.
Don O'Bear has just joined us on the call. Just wanted to.
So
Yeah.
Julie, one
reference
thing
of
to
it.
keep in mind is I feel like you're worried that they're gonna go away. They can go away. We're not locking them any which way to this. So they can go away in 120 days, no matter. And so I
Yep.
don't feel like we're locking them in if we don't.
No, I agree.
reject.
I learned,
Okay.
yeah, no, I agree. I think my concern is, I just think we all need to be ready if we reject the bid, that this board of 7, I think it's low likelihood that we will close this deal under our 7 people on the board. And I don't know if we're thinking about that scenario. I haven't spent all that much time thinking about that scenario, which is very different than I think we were as a board 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And I think we've got a large constituency that probably is in the minority tonight showing up, meaning, you know, a big part of a geographic footprint that may never see this come to be. And yes, there's risk that Bridge could fall out, but again, I just am concerned that as they now have a lot more information, and I don't think the deal will get done with this board. And so if everyone's like, oh yeah, no, I kind of came into the meeting thinking that, I'm just a little slower in catching up to that
Yeah.
thought. And I don't mean to be negative, but I don't see a scenario with high likelihood of that transpiring, and maybe that's where people are at. And again,
That's where I think that I feel like we just have to trust that process of if, you know, whoever my replacement is, and, you know, I think we have to trust the process that I don't know, I guess we just
Yeah,
have to
and I'm
trust
just trying to
that
figure
whatever
out, to explain to
board-
someone who hasn't been caught up on all this, who's like, oh, I thought we were getting some money for the school. Like, what is the hang up here? It's because we wrote, and I don't want to be accusatory, but is it market to demand, I didn't ask at the time, so I apologize. Is it market to demand the earnest money at submission, kind of in a school setting?
I've seen it done many
Okay,
times
yeah, and
that
I know
way.
your experience, and you had
Yeah,
shared that,
yeah.
and I'm not trying to at
No,
all
no, I get
question
it.
your
Yeah, yeah.
experience. It seems like a little point for a giant potential for hopes and dreams, and I think the messaging if the messaging is, hey, we listened to the community, and boy, we heard things, we didn't know people would be upset that there'd be an industrial park in their backyard. Oh, the hell, we know that we would expect nothing that, I don't think anything I'm gonna hear tonight is going to be new information. And that's not why people are here, they sometimes just wanna share. But I just am not quite identifying where the shift in moving forward
Our
happened.
So I don't think the messaging, for me, I would think we don't want to change the messaging as far as, I think it's really important to be clear to the public that this does not stop the sale. This does not, we are still interested in selling this property
Mhm.
because, and yes, we have listened to things,
Absolutely. Yep.
but I think we need to be very clear on that so that it doesn't appear
So the
that
reason we're
we're
proposing to reject is,
shifting.
fill in the blank, I'm still not.
We're not
Non-conforming
And
Due to.
terms and conditions.
And we're not gonna say because lack of earnest money deposit.
I wouldn't elaborate on that, no. I would simply say they were non-conforming bids. Brian had communicated publicly after the bid opening that it was all subject to legal review.
Oh, yeah.
And so if somebody were to say, well, hey, why are they non-conforming? I would say it was part of the process, legal review, they were not conforming with the terms and conditions, and they weren't. I don't think we need to get into specificity about neither of these guys came in with the requisite earnest money.
The proposed communication, I mean, it's loaded and ready to go tomorrow morning, pending the outcome of tonight, but it essentially says that it's, both bids were rejected due to nonconformity. It also has a couple sentences about the board remains committed to exploring a sale, continue to communicate, negotiate with interested parties. I can't remember exactly what it says, but.
And I think that's why, I mean, in addition to just the idea of it, but I do think people know that this isn't the end of the conversation, which is why they're here. Maybe, they want to make a lot of noise, maybe scare off buyers, but also just let us know,
Yeah.
they know that it's not done.
You think people know it's not done when they see us reject it?
I've read people commenting
I
on,
do.
like, just the social listening piece of
Yeah.
it. They're like,
Yeah.
I think it's, don't be surprised if this is a technicality and they're still
Right.
gonna
Okay.
keep moving behind
Yes.
scenes and, they're negotiating with, then there's all kinds of other things. So
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
think that conversation is happening among that group of people. So,
And just so you all know too, that before we begin the motion to review and have a dialogue, I was planning to read a statement, and it does say, basically, if the board rejects the bids tonight, the property will remain for sale at the minimum $55 million.
Okay. I didn't know it would be in
So
that
we're going to be
crisp
that
detail.
clear. We will be that clear. And I reiterated some things that I feel were important for them to understand about what the role of Willow Springs is in the zoning process, which probably is out there, but there are probably plenty of people who have not looked at that website and really gotten into seeing what the details are, because a lot of people just don't seem to understand what our role is and what Willow Springs is.
but I think that they
So-
kind of do, but they also don't care
Yeah.
because this is a chance to stop it before they even have to go to Willow Springs.
For
I don't think
sure.
they trust Willow Springs. I think Willow
I
Springs
know.
is coming here to talk tonight.
I know.
Because they don't want to deal with it.
Yes,
I think all
yes.
those things are
I,
All that is true. All that is
A
true.
and D, all of the
I think
above.
many people see this as the only way to
But
stop this.
I'm going to be
They
clear
feel
about
once it gets
that.
to Willow Springs, then it's much more difficult because there's a legal threshold there.
And so, because I want to make sure we have enough time to get down to Reber and just regroup and settle, we'll want to wrap up in about 5 minutes here, but we can carry. There's just one more point that I wanted to make, and that was that at the time of when we after agenda-related public comments, we'll have Andrew Johannes will be here, student representative. Then Dr. Waterman gives his report. Then we go on to the very first item. Obviously, you guys know is to vote on this issue, but it is also an opportunity for if you have a comment or something that you do think you want the public to know, or you feel you want to celebrate why we did this in the first place, which was to, you know, provide enhancements to aging facilities, buildings that haven't been really upgraded or touched since, like, I mean, that cafeteria has been around since 1957, and it hasn't been had an upgrade or facelift since then. We have, you know, there's so many things that we know we could do and we can improve upon. If you feel that that's a good opportunity to mention that, I would encourage you to do so. But because, you know, we'll have some really serious things to address. We heard from the community that they would like to see a lot of upgrades. There's a lot of facilities that they want to improve upon, and we have limited resources and ways to do that. So, you know, let's be clear. We were trying to do something that was at the least burden of all of our taxpayers, and that's where we're at with that. So that's all I have to say. But Michael, it sounds like you have something to say.
Yeah, I do.
Real quick, when did you say that we would say that?
I will read that before we, after Brian is done with the superintendent report. I'll say that we're moving on to unfinished business action item, consideration
pass
and
that
approval.
down?
I'll read that. And then
Oh,
I'm going
I'm
to say,
sorry.
as part of, then I'm going to launch into my statement. And then I'm going to introduce
That's it.
Eris and say that Eris is here to, am I supposed to pass this down?
Yeah, pass it down.
Oh, and then I'm going to say Eris is here to answer any additional questions anybody has or any other comments. And you can certainly, you know, if you want to ask any questions of Eris, you can do that then. And then we'll motion. And that's that. Okay, Michael.
So, I think that the board should look at all these moving pieces that are happening and that are going and swirling around. As we saw this unravel and come together over the last week, I started to look at like some of the players and the pieces that are all here together. And I think that while, you know, the board may think that I'm looking at like conspiracy kinds of theories, I think that it's incumbent upon me to at least share what I see is happening, because we may not be getting the full pieces. And there's still some pieces that are missing with Bridge, and how they have, as you just stated tonight, have been leading us down the road where it has been like, yes, likely, this is great. We feel this is going to happen, and that's what made the board feel comfortable to even look and further look at the different pieces of the sale and to get the enrollment study done, and then now we come down to today where it's now they're lukewarm. And so for me, one of the things that I see is when you look at the McCook property that was sold last June, that was by Bridge, and Bridge bought that property and for 70 to 80 million. That was around the same time that we, I believe, got the solicitation out the blue of a $55 million or $60 million offer for the Willow Springs land. And so that just came out of the blue and from Bridge. And so when you look at all the players in this McCook development, you'll see from the second to the left, you'll see Chris Getty, who's the Township of Lyons supervisor. Next to him is Terry Carr, who's the McCook mayor, and then John Pazareski, or however you pronounce his name. When you look at Chris Carr, he's part of, his brother is Ken Getty, part of the TTO. You also look at Michael Thiessen, who lives in Willow Springs. When you put all those kind of pieces together, and then you look at Terry Carr, who is the mayor of McCook, and then you look at Melissa Nettermeyer, whatever her last name, you know, it's apparently that she's dating the McCook mayor. And then you look at Terry Carr, who is also on the Willow Springs trustee board, who is the father to Terry Carr Jr., the mayor of McCook. When you look at all of these kinds of pieces together, I think that there could be a possibility that there could be some meddling in from the TTO side as it relates to this deal and initiative. When The Des Plaines Valley News is owned by Steve Landak, who's the former state rep, who's part of the TTO, who's published this. Now, when you look at all of these people coming together, and that John Pazareski, to him to be so entrenched with that McCook development deal with those folks, that the likelihood that there is no connection with TTO folks, I think is highly unlikely. And then especially how he's led us down this road to where it was very likely, and then he's had an in-person meeting with, I believe, 2 board members, and I think you, Harris, and Brian, and that was also very positive. And so, you know, it really, and then for them to come back and say they want to change the terms and conditions for a sale of this magnitude, is to me flabbergasting. I mean, and also to make it so more positive for them and less risk for them, which is ridiculous that we would even think about doing that. Make it less risk averse for them, and it just, for this kind of magnitude, I don't think that we are that desperate to sell it to Bridge or to anybody else for that matter. I'm for a potential sale, but I am not for a potential sale to Bridge, because I found that I think that they have shown themselves to be very untrustworthy given the steps that they have taken in these last few weeks with this sale and matter. And you gotta believe that they have had to have conversations with Willow Springs. And for Willow Springs to come out here and to lambast us over the last weeks is just amazing, because they're the ones who have the final say in the zoning, and then for them to not have a conversation with Bridge and to say, oh, just 2 weeks ago was the first time we've had a conversation with Bridge, it's just hogwash. So I think that the board should be considering some of these other tightly wound connections that are possibly happening, because there is nothing that Michael Thiessen would want to do is to gut this board. And you should just know that. They are like downright will do that in a heartbeat.
What would, because I'm following this, but
Yeah, hey, I don't want to, you guys, I'm just noticing it's almost 7:20, and we do need to walk down there for the meeting. I do want you to follow up though with Michael, and I think we can continue this in closed session when we come back. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I had to get it off my chest.
No, I
now what the
appreciate that.
board does with it, I'm for no Bridge at all. So I will be a no for Bridge from here on eternity. However, if there's somebody else that possibly comes in, maybe. But if you want a unanimous vote, you won't be getting it if it's Bridge from me. But I know it's the rest of the board, and I'll abide by what the board does.
Well, and Michael, I'm totally curious about your comments, and I too tried to follow most of them, but it's the first I'm hearing them. So, I mean, I think that our goal from the beginning was to sell this property and turn this asset into an asset for our community and our students. And I'd be curious, you know, if the board decides to change the terms or not to change the terms. And let's just hypothetically say that we don't change the terms, and Bridge is able to come up and live with what we had. Everything that you just mentioned, I guess I'm wondering how that fits into a legal situation of moving forward and potentially selling this property for the, $55 million in order to turn this asset into an asset for our community and other things that we talked about. So I guess I'm curious about everything that you just said, but I'm also highly curious about how that relates to the legalities of moving forward with a deal and what that would mean,
And I think that was what we planned to talk about when we recessed back into closed session after our meeting tonight.
So to be continued, you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Yep.
to be continued, for going in there though, are we in agreement that we're voting to reject? Should I be asking that?
Yeah.
I'm in agreement
Yeah.
with
I
it.
am, are we all?
All right, we're
I
in
can do it.
agreement,
Okay.
Dawn?
I just
Yeah.
want to know where
Okay.
everyone was.
Yep,
on
no,
that.
thank you for that closure, so, okay. That's what it will be then. Can I have a motion then to adjourn closed session and move back into open session?
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you,
Aye.
everybody. Okay, Dawn, we'll talk to you in a few.
Okay, I'm going to text Brian. I'm going to text you and Carrie right now.
Okay,
We can come,
Okay.
we're coming back, so